One big story that got a lot of media coverage this week were the climate protesters that delayed a Harvard-Yale football game by staging a sit-in on the field. I'm not sure if it was during halftime or when it was, that they had this protest in order to try to spread awareness for climate issues. Now, I saw a lot of people complaining about this and saying that this is such a nuisance, it doesn't help anything. Who is this really getting a message across to? Who is this convincing? And my response to that is, what else do you expect? Like, people bring up the science behind climate change. 98% of scientists who are experts in climate are in consensus that it's caused by man-made activity. We can't use the science to convince anybody. Politicians are not on their side unless if the politicians are against major oil companies. So there's so much money poured into our political process by big oil companies, by ExxonMobil, by the Koch brothers, that prevent data about climate change from coming out. The White House right now is directly shutting down any science, any scientific development concerning climate change. They're shutting down. These big oil companies have known about the effects of climate change for about, give or take 40 years, 30, 40 years, and they have hidden it from the public because hiding the effects of climate change is better for the profit motive. Of course, our president right now is totally against the science of it. There's not a lot of people listening completely, and I know people want to say that the U.S. only causes 15% of global emissions. I want to really rework the way we look at the emissions caused, and of course, China and India that have zero human rights regulations, zero regulations in general, are going to produce a lot of toxic smog and a lot of carbon emissions. Of course they are, because they're producing products so that the rest of the world can have them for cheap. So we're saying the U.S. in-house produces 15% of all our emissions in a country of 360 million people. 15%. We should be taking into our total any company that ever left the United States to produce in China. We should take into our total any company that produces from China and India that's creating emissions with the purpose of selling cheap products to our people. We're encouraging this action, whether you like it or not. 15% is not the accurate number for emissions caused by America. But anyway, back to the protest. What do you expect them to do? Like, no other thing gets across to people. And we have a long history of protesting for things and having it work. Like, there's the Yellow Jackets of France right now making a lot of efforts, and they're getting a lot of advancement on the ground. Protesting a government that's not working for them, issues that the people want that government will not get across. Like, how could you blame them for for doing this? And of course, it disrupts a football game, so that hits our key point in American society. But these sports are designed to take our mind off of these real issues, and an issue like climate change is something that doesn't comply well with our reactionary culture. Like, people don't usually react to things that they can't see vividly right in front of them until they directly see the effects of something. We don't usually prepare. We spend a lot more money and a lot more time recovering from disaster than we do preventing it. And I feel like we're continuing the path with this. Like, there's so many instances where, think about what corporations have lied to people about. Something like lead. They used to use lead in paint. They used to allow lead in water supplies. They did not tell anyone it was poisonous. Look up lead medicine. I'm sure there'll be articles and advertisements from mid-1900s saying lead is healthy for you. Same thing with cigarettes. The cigarette companies had posters out saying doctors recommended cigarettes for oral hygiene and health. And we know that is completely wrong. And now with the whole vaping thing, they used to advertise vaping in Joel's as a way to get people off of normal cigarette use, but now it's become an entranceway, a gateway for kids to get into it because they're good flavors. They advertise it to kids, and just now the government's cracking down on them. But we already have a whole society that is based around using it. So something like climate change that you can't see is going to be hard to get across to people. But I don't know how much we could yell at kids for doing something like this. And I saw a lot of people claiming, like, look at these rich kids with all this privilege, like, protesting a football game. Like, they're just annoying. Like, how do you know? Like, what is guaranteed of their status? And why does that matter? Like, what's the difference if it's a poor person trying to make a difference or a rich person? And also, at these universities, Harvard and Yale, we can't pretend there's not initiatives to get lower income people into these schools and to provide financial aid to people in these schools. Just overall, if you're complaining about the climate protest, then I don't know. Like, I guess you could complain about the methods, but what other method is there yet to try? Because nothing has worked, and that's all I have to say on that issue. But I have about 5 minutes. I want to cover this hashtag on Twitter. I really enjoy this hashtag because I really dislike the network MSNBC.